The rain hammered down on the muddy hills of Okinawa as gunfire echoed across the battlefield. Sergeant James Cooper pressed his body against a fallen tree, breathing hard. Around him, 6 Marines fought for every inch of ground against fierce Japanese resistance. It was April 1945, and this battle had already claimed thousands of lives on both sides. Cooper wiped mud from his face and checked his rifle. The Battle of Okinawa was the largest amphibious assault in the Pacific War. Over 180,000 American troops had landed on this small island, facing 100,000 Japanese defenders who had sworn to fight to the death. The island was only 60 miles long, but every cave and hill became a fortress. "Sergeant, they're falling back," shouted Private Tommy Chun, a young soldier from California. Chun pointed toward the hillside where Japanese soldiers had been firing moments ago. Something was strange. The enemy soldiers weren't retreating in the usual way. They were vanishing into the hillside itself, disappearing like ghosts. Cooper raised his hand, signaling his men to hold their fire. He watched carefully through the rain. One moment, a Japanese soldier was visible near a large rock formation. The next moment, he was gone. No body fell. No blood trail. Just gone. "Where the hell are they going?" muttered Corporal Davis, a veteran from Texas who had fought through Guadalcanal and Iwo Jima. The Marines waited for 30 minutes after the shooting stopped. Military protocol said they should call for backup before investigating. But Cooper had learned that hesitation cost lives in this war. He gathered his 6 men, and they moved forward carefully, weapons ready. The hillside looked ordinary at first. Rocks, mud, and thick jungle vegetation covered everything. But Chun had sharp eyes. He noticed something unusual. Behind a massive boulder covered in vines, there was a gap. Not natural. Too smooth. Too regular. "Sir, over here," Chun whispered. Cooper approached and pulled away the vines. His breath caught. Behind the vegetation was an opening carved into solid rock. The entrance was barely wide enough for one man to squeeze through. Cool air flowed from the darkness inside, carrying a strange smell. Not the usual smell of gunpowder and death. Something older, like ancient stone and damp earth. "This isn't on any map," said Davis, checking their military charts. Intelligence never reported tunnels in this sector. The Japanese had built thousands of defensive positions across Okinawa. They used natural caves and hand-dug tunnels to create an underground fortress. American forces had learned this the hard way, losing many men to ambushes from hidden positions. But this entrance looked different. The carvings seemed too old, too precise for a military bunker hastily built for war. Cooper made his decision. "Chun, Davis, Rodriguez, you're with me. Thompson, you stay here with the others. If we're not back in 1 hour, report to command." Thompson nodded, his face grim. Everyone knew that 1 hour in these tunnels could mean death. Japanese soldiers often rigged caves with explosives or fought to the last man in the darkness. The 4 Marines squeezed through the entrance one by one. Cooper went first, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The tunnel was taller inside than it looked from outside. A grown man could stand upright. The walls were smooth, carved by hand many years ago. But carved by whom? They moved deeper, boots splashing in shallow puddles. The temperature dropped despite the tropical heat outside. Their flashlights revealed something unexpected on the walls. Markings. Symbols. Not Japanese military signs, but something much older. Ancient writing that none of them could read. "This doesn't look like a bunker," whispered Rodriguez, a quiet man from New Mexico who rarely spoke. After 50 yards, the tunnel opened into a larger passage. Here they found evidence of recent military activity. Empty ammunition boxes with Japanese markings. Discarded food containers. A medical kit. Someone had been here recently, but had left in a hurry. Then Chin's flashlight beam caught something that made everyone freeze. Against the tunnel wall sat 3 clay pots. Ancient pottery, cracked with age. Next to them lay old coins scattered on the ground. These artifacts looked hundreds of years old, nothing to do with the war. "What is this place?" Davis breathed. Cooper knelt and picked up one of the coins. It bore symbols he had never seen before. The Ryukyu Kingdom, the ancient civilization that once ruled these islands, had left its mark here. But why would Japanese soldiers be using a historical site as a military position? The answer came from deeper in the tunnel. A sound, faint but clear in the underground silence. Crying. Children crying. All four Marines raised their weapons instantly, fingers on triggers. But this wasn't the sound of soldiers. These were young voices, scared and weak. Civilian voices. Cooper's mind raced. Okinawan civilians had suffered terribly in this battle. Caught between two armies, thousands had died or taken shelter in caves. Japanese propaganda told them Americans would torture and kill them. So many hid in terror. If there were children down here, they needed help. But military training warned him this could be a trap. Japanese soldiers sometimes used civilians as shields or bait for ambushes. The crying continued, echoing through the stone passages. It came from deeper in the tunnel system, down a passage that descended into absolute darkness. "Sir," Chin looked at Cooper, waiting for orders. Cooper thought of his own daughter back home in Michigan. She was 8 years old, the same age as those crying voices sounded. He thought of why he had joined this war. Not to kill, but to protect, to save lives, to bring people home. He clicked off his flashlight's safety cover and checked his pistol. "We go deeper. Stay alert. Stay together. If this is a trap, we fight our way out. If those are children, we bring them up to safety." The four Marines moved forward into the darkness, following the sound of crying voices. None of them knew they were about to discover something that would change everything they thought they knew about war, about this island, and about what really lurked beneath Okinawa's blood-soaked soil. Behind them, the tunnel entrance seemed to shrink, like the mouth of some vast creature swallowing them whole. The tunnel stretched deeper than Cooper had imagined possible. His flashlight beam barely reached the walls as the passage widened into something massive. This was no simple cave. This was architecture. Someone had carved these chambers from solid rock with incredible skill and patience. The crying grew louder as they descended. Davis marked their path with chalk on the walls, an old trick from cave exploration. If they needed to run, they would follow the marks back to daylight. The marks also told a disturbing story. They had traveled over 300 yards underground, descending steadily. They were now deep beneath the hills of Okinawa. Rodriguez stopped suddenly and pointed his flashlight at the ceiling. Everyone looked up and gasped. The chamber they stood in was enormous, like a cathedral carved from stone. Support pillars rose 20 feet high. Carved alcoves lined the walls. This place was ancient, built with purpose and care. "The Ryukyu Kingdom," Cooper whispered, remembering his briefing before landing on Okinawa. The kingdom had ruled these islands for 450 years before Japan annexed them in 1879. They had been skilled builders and traders, creating a sophisticated civilization. But nobody had mentioned underground cities in the intelligence reports. The crying came from ahead, through another passage. The Marines moved forward, weapons ready, but lowered slightly. If these were truly civilians, they did not want to terrify them more than necessary. They entered another large chamber, and their flashlights revealed a scene that broke their hearts. Huddled against a far wall were approximately 30 people. Old men and women, young mothers clutching babies, children ranging from toddlers to teenagers. All Okinawan, all terrified. The civilians screamed when the lights hit them. Women pulled children behind them. An elderly man stood up with shaking hands raised, speaking rapid Japanese mixed with a local Okinawan dialect. "We're Americans," Cooper said loudly, lowering his rifle completely. "We're here to help. Does anyone speak English?" Silence. The children continued crying. The adults stared with wide eyes, clearly expecting violence. Japanese propaganda had told them horrible lies about American soldiers. Then a young woman stepped forward slowly. She looked about 20 years old, thin from hunger, her clothes torn and dirty. She spoke in broken English, her voice trembling. "Please, no hurt. Children here. Old people here. No soldiers. Please." Cooper felt relief flood through him. "We won't hurt anyone. I am Sergeant Cooper. What's your name?" "Yuki," she said quietly. "I learned English in school. Before war." Before the war, Okinawa had been relatively peaceful. The island was poor, but beautiful, with farming communities and fishing villages. Then Japan had militarized the island, knowing the Americans would eventually invade. They forced Okinawan civilians to help build fortifications. They took food. They took young men for labor battalions. When the battle started in April, civilians became trapped between two massive armies. Over 100,000 Okinawan civilians would die in this battle, more than the military casualties on both sides combined. Many died in crossfire. Others were killed by Japanese soldiers who thought they might cooperate with Americans. Some committed suicide rather than face capture, believing the propaganda about American cruelty. "How did you get down here?" Cooper asked Yuki gently. Through halting English and hand gestures, Yuki told their story. Japanese soldiers had discovered these tunnels 3 months ago while digging defensive positions. They realized the ancient tunnel system was massive, connecting caves across many miles of Okinawa. The military forced civilians to help expand the tunnels, creating underground hospitals, ammunition storage rooms, and command centers. This group of civilians had been working in this section when the battle intensified. The Japanese soldiers suddenly abandoned them 3 days ago, sealing some exits and leaving them trapped with limited food and water. The soldiers had seemed terrified of something, but Yuki did not know what. Chin distributed water from his canteen to the children while Yuki spoke. Rodriguez shared his rations. These simple acts of kindness made the civilians relax slightly. Davis examined the chamber with his flashlight and whistled low. "Sarge, you need to see this." Cooper followed Davis to the far side of the chamber. Behind a row of supply boxes, a passage led to another room. Inside, they found a Japanese military command post. Maps covered a table. Radio equipment sat in the corner, though it was dead now. Medical supplies lined shelves. But what caught Cooper's attention were the maps. These were not simple defensive maps. These showed the entire underground tunnel network. Red lines connected dozens of locations across Okinawa. Some tunnels led to the coast. Others connected to Japanese defensive positions still fighting on the surface. The network was enormous, far bigger than American intelligence had suspected. "This changes everything," Cooper said. "If Japanese forces can move freely underground across the island, they can reinforce positions without us seeing them. They can retreat and attack from different locations. This explains why we keep getting surprised by enemy forces appearing where they shouldn't be." But something else bothered him. The map showed certain tunnels marked with red X symbols and Japanese writing that meant forbidden or sealed. These tunnels led to the deepest parts of the network. Why would the Japanese military seal their own tunnels? Yuki approached timidly. "Sergeant Cooper, I tell you something. Something bad." Cooper turned to her. "What is it?" "The soldiers leave because scared. 3 days ago, they send men to deep tunnels." She pointed at the map where the red X marks were. "Men not come back. Other soldiers go find them. They find blood. Only blood. No voices. They hear sounds in dark. Bad sounds. They run away. They leave us here." Chun laughed nervously. "Sounds? What kind of sounds?" Yuki's face was deadly serious. "Like animal. Big animal. Old man here, his name Kenji, he say old stories true. Old stories say tunnels have guardian. Something that protect this place long time ago. Japanese soldiers wake it up." Davis shook his head. "That's superstition. Battle stress. Those soldiers probably just deserted." But Rodriguez was not laughing. He was looking at the tunnel entrances surrounding their chamber. There were 5 passages leading away into darkness. "Sarge, how do we get these people out?" Cooper studied the map. The entrance they had used was too small and too far for these elderly people and children to travel easily. But the map showed a larger exit 2 chambers away, big enough to walk through easily. They could evacuate everyone through that route. Then the lights went out. All 4 flashlights died simultaneously, plunging the chamber into absolute darkness. The civilian screamed. Cooper slapped his flashlight, but it stayed dead. Impossible. They had fresh batteries. All 4 could not fail at once. In the darkness, they heard it. Breathing. Heavy, rhythmic breathing that was not human. It came from one of the passages, echoing off stone walls. The sound of something large moving slowly through the tunnels. Something that had been sleeping in the deepest chambers. Something that the Japanese soldiers had awakened when they expanded the tunnels. Something that had hunted and killed anyone who entered its territory for the past 3 days. The breathing grew closer. Closer. Cooper heard the sound of claws scraping against stone. Davis fumbled for his rifle in the darkness. Chen's voice shook as he whispered a prayer in Chinese. Rodriguez stood frozen, every instinct screaming at him to run, but having nowhere to go. Yuki's voice came from the darkness, barely audible. The old man say it never leaves deep tunnels. We must stay in light chambers. But we walk away from light. We walk down to where it lives. The breathing stopped. The chamber fell silent. But everyone could feel it. Something massive stood in the darkness with them, listening, deciding who to take first. Cooper's training took over in the darkness. Fear was natural, but panic killed soldiers faster than bullets. He forced his voice to stay calm and steady. Nobody move. Nobody make a sound. The breathing came closer. Whatever creature stood in the darkness with them, it was hunting. Cooper could feel air move as something large shifted position. The smell hit him next. Not the clean smell of ocean air or jungle rain. This was the smell of decay, of old blood, of something that lived where sunlight never reached. A child whimpered in the darkness. The breathing stopped. Silence stretched for 5 terrible seconds. Then a roar split the air, so loud in the enclosed space that Cooper felt it in his chest. The creature rushed forward. Claws scraped stone. People screamed. Run! Cooper shouted. Everyone run for the upper chambers. Chaos erupted. In the absolute darkness, people stumbled and fell. Cooper fired his rifle blindly toward the sound of the creature. The muzzle flashed briefly, illuminating the chamber. For one frozen moment, he saw it, massive, scaled, with eyes that reflected light like a cat, but huge and ancient. Then darkness swallowed everything again. The Marines fired their weapons, creating strobing flashes of light. Each flash revealed glimpses. People running, children being carried, the creature moving with terrible speed. Then Davis found a flare in his pack and ignited it. Red light flooded the chamber. Everyone could see clearly now. The civilians ran for the upper passage, the elderly being helped by the young. Cooper, Chun, Davis, and Rodriguez formed a line between the people and the creature, weapons raised, but what they saw made no sense. The creature had vanished. The chamber was empty except for the fleeing civilians. Yet they had all heard it, all felt it. Where had it gone? The side passages, Rodriguez said, understanding. It knows these tunnels. It's hunting us. They ran after the civilians, the flare held high. The red light created dancing shadows on ancient walls. They reached the upper chamber where they had first found the people. Here the tunnel divided into 3 passages. Which way led to the exit? Before Cooper could check the map, he heard new sounds. Boots. Many boots. Military boots approaching from 2 of the passages. His Marines raised weapons instantly. The civilians pressed against the walls in terror. From the left passage emerged Japanese soldiers. 5 of them, weapons raised, eyes wild. From the right passage came 4 more. The 2 groups of enemies faced each other across the chamber, guns aimed, fingers on triggers. But something was wrong with these Japanese soldiers. Their uniforms were torn and filthy. Some had bloodstains. They looked exhausted and terrified, nothing like the fierce warriors who usually fought to the death. Their officer, a lieutenant with a bandaged head, lowered his rifle slightly when he saw the civilians. The lieutenant spoke in Japanese. Yuki translated, her voice shaking. He says, "Put guns down." He says, "We all trapped. The creature hunting all of us." "Tell him we don't take orders from the enemy," Davis growled. But Cooper was thinking faster. These Japanese soldiers had not fired immediately. They were retreating from something, not attacking. The Battle of Okinawa had been brutal. Japanese forces had lost over 70,000 men already. Many had committed suicide rather than surrender. Their military code, Bushido, demanded death before dishonor. Yet these soldiers were running. "Ask him about the creature," Cooper said to Yuki. Ask him what he knows." Yuki spoke in Japanese. The lieutenant responded, his words tumbling out rapidly. Yuki translated, struggling with the military terms. His name Lieutenant Tanaka. 3 days ago, his commander sends patrol to deep tunnels. They find old chamber, very old, with stone door. They open door. Inside they find bones. Many bones. Old bones. And something alive. Something that should not be alive. The lieutenant continued speaking, and Yuki's face grew pale as she translated. The patrol men scream on radio. Then radio goes dead. Tanaka and 20 men go to find them. They find blood everywhere. They find marks on walls. Claw marks. And they see it. The Guardian. The thing that old people say protect these tunnels. The thing from old Ryukyu legends. Throughout Okinawa's history, legends spoke of creatures that lived in the deep caves. Sea dragons. Cave guardians. Spirits that protected the island. Most people thought these were just stories to scare children. But the Ryukyu kingdom had sealed certain caves and forbidden people to enter. They had marked them with warnings carved in stone. The Japanese military had ignored these warnings when they needed tunnels for defense. Now something that had slept for centuries was awake and angry. The lieutenant spoke again, pointing at the civilians. Yuki translated. He says his men, not enemy now. He says creature killed 12 of his soldiers. He says we must work together or all die down here. Davis spat on the ground. Work with them? They killed my friends at Iwo Jima. They tortured prisoners. They forced these civilians into slave labor. Now, they want our help. They're soldiers following orders, same as us, Chin said quietly. Maybe bad orders, but they didn't choose this war either. Cooper looked at the Japanese soldiers. They looked back at him. Both groups were young men far from home, fighting a war that killed more people every day. In this moment, in this underground darkness, they faced a choice. Keep fighting each other and let the creature hunt them one by one. Or work together and maybe save the civilians. The lieutenant seemed to understand without translation. He removed his sidearm slowly and placed it on the ground. He spoke in broken English. We help. We protect. He pointed at the children. Protect them. Together. One of his soldiers protested in Japanese, but Tanaka silenced him with a sharp command. The soldier reluctantly lowered his weapon. Cooper made his decision. He lowered his rifle and extended his hand. Together. The lieutenant hesitated, then gripped Cooper's hand. They shook once, briefly. American and Japanese. Enemies by war, allies by necessity. We need to get these people out, Cooper said. He pulled out the map and showed it to Tanaka. This exit. Can you read these markings? Tanaka studied the map and nodded. He pointed to a path through 3 chambers. His fingers traced the route carefully. Then he pointed to another tunnel marked with red X symbols and shook his head violently. No, bad way. Creature way. The roar came again, closer this time, from the passage behind the Japanese soldiers. The creature was following them, hunting them. The flare light flickered and dimmed. They had maybe 5 minutes of light left. Move now, Cooper ordered. Marines take the front with civilians. Japanese soldiers cover the rear. Tanaka, you guide us. If that thing attacks, we all shoot it. The combined force began to move. 30 terrified civilians surrounded by 14 soldiers who had been killing each other hours ago. The flare light cast long shadows. Every sound made people jump. Every darkness looked like death. They entered the next chamber and found it was full of Japanese military supplies. Ammunition boxes, grenades, more flares, medical supplies, food and water. Tanaka shouted orders to his men. They grabbed flares and grenades. Chun and Rodriguez took ammunition that fit their weapons. The civilians grabbed food and water, stuffing their pockets. For 3 days, they had been starving down here. Now they ate while they walked. Knowing these might be their last meals, the passage narrowed. They moved single file now. The children cried, but their mothers hushed them. The elderly struggled, but kept moving, knowing rest meant death. The flare light made everything look like a nightmare painted in red and black. Then the light went out. The flare had burned completely. Total darkness fell again. Someone screamed. The breathing sound returned, echoing from somewhere behind them. The creature was still hunting, still following, waiting for them to show weakness. Davis lit another flare immediately, his hands shaking. The red light pushed back the darkness once more. Everyone stood frozen, weapons pointed at every shadow. But the creature was not visible. It was playing with them, stalking them like a predator that knew its prey had nowhere to run. "Keep moving," Cooper commanded. "Don't stop for anything." They pressed forward through the narrow passage. The walls pressed close on both sides. Some of the larger men had to turn sideways to squeeze through. This was a terrible place for a fight. If the creature attacked here, there would be no escape. After 20 minutes of slow progress, the passage opened into another large chamber. This one was different from the others. The walls were covered in ancient carvings. Symbols and pictures told stories from long ago. Yuki's grandfather, the old man named Kenji, walked to the walls and touched them gently. He spoke in the Okinawan dialect. Yuki translated, her voice filled with wonder. He says this is old shrine. Very old. From before Ryukyu Kingdom. From first people who live on Okinawa. He says his grandfather told him stories about these places. Places where ancient people worship. Places where they put offerings to spirits who protect the island. Kenji pointed to the carvings. They showed people bringing food and treasures to a large creature. In the carvings, the creature looked like a dragon with scales and powerful claws. But it was not an evil monster in these pictures. The people bowed to it respectfully. They brought gifts. They lived in peace with it. He says the creature not evil. Yuki continued. Old stories say protect island. It sleep in deep caves. People promise never dig too deep, never disturb the guardian's rest. They make this promise for 1,000 years. Then war comes. Japanese army dig everywhere. They wake up something that should stay sleeping. One of the Japanese soldiers spoke up nervously. Tanaka translated to English for Cooper. My man says 2 days ago, they find another chamber below. Chamber full of bones from long ago. Human bones. Old offerings. They take some items from museum after war ends. That night, the creature attacks for first time. Cooper understood now. In the old days, people respected the creature's territory. They brought offerings and stayed in the upper tunnels only. But modern soldiers did not believe in legends. They explored everywhere, took everything, respected nothing. They had broken an ancient agreement between humans and the guardian of these caves. How do we stop it? Rodriguez asked. Can we kill it? Kenji spoke again, and Yuki translated carefully. He says maybe we not need kill it. Maybe we need calm it. Make it understand we go away. Leave its home alone. How? Davis demanded. We can't talk to monsters. But Cooper was thinking about war in a different way. He had seen terrible things in this war. He had killed men who were probably good people in peacetime. He had watched young soldiers die, calling for their mothers. War turned everyone into monsters, even good men. What if this creature was not a monster? What if it was just defending its home from invaders? Before he could voice this thought, the ground shook. A deep rumble came from beneath their feet. Dust fell from the ceiling. The ancient chamber trembled. Earthquake, Chen asked. No, Tanaka said grimly. That no earthquake. That is moving. It moving beneath us. The civilians panicked. Parents grabbed children. The elderly clutched each other. Soldiers raised weapons, but had no target to shoot. The rumbling grew louder. The ground shook harder. Cracks appeared in the ancient walls. Then, from 3 different passages, the creature appeared. Not one creature. 3 of them. They were massive, each one 12 feet long with scales that looked like black armor. Their eyes glowed in the flare light with an eerie green color. They moved on 4 powerful legs, with claws that scraped the stone floor. Their mouths opened to reveal rows of sharp teeth. They looked like giant lizards from prehistoric times, like creatures that should have died out millions of years ago. But here they were, alive and angry, defending their territory from invaders. The soldiers opened fire. Bullets ricocheted off the creature's scales, barely scratching them. Grenades exploded, creating smoke and chaos, but not stopping the attack. The creatures roared in fury and charged. Fall back, Cooper shouted. Protect the civilians. The soldiers formed a defensive line, while the civilians ran toward the far passage that led to the exit. But one of the creatures was faster. It cut off the escape route, blocking the passage with its massive body. They were trapped. 3 creatures surrounding them. Walls on all sides. No way forward. No way back. Point one of the Japanese soldiers, a young private who looked barely 18, did something incredible. He pulled all the grenades from his belt, activated them, and ran screaming toward the nearest creature. The explosion was massive in the enclosed space. The private died instantly, but the blast damaged the creature and made it retreat. His sacrifice opened a narrow window. Tanaka saw it and made a decision. He shouted orders to his remaining men. They understood immediately. This was the samurai way. Sacrifice to protect others. Death with honor. Go! Tanaka yelled to Cooper in English. Take people. We hold here. We buy time. We fight together. Cooper insisted. No time for together. Tanaka pushed him toward the civilians. Your job, protect them. Our job, protect you. Soldiers' duty. Go now. 3 more Japanese soldiers moved forward with grenades and rifles. They would make their last stand here, in this ancient shrine, buying time with their lives. Tanaka looked at Cooper one final time. There was no hatred in his eyes, just determination and peace. Tell world we not monsters, Tanaka said quietly. We soldiers, like you, we do duty. We protect innocent people. Tell them. Cooper wanted to argue, wanted to fight beside them, but he knew Tanaka was right. The civilians needed protection. Someone had to get them to safety. His duty was to the innocent, not to glorious last stands. I'll tell them, Cooper promised. I'll make sure people know what you did here. Tanaka nodded once, then turned to face the creatures. He raised his sword, a family heirloom he carried into battle, and shouted a war cry. His men joined him, voices rising in unison as they charged. Cooper grabbed Yuki. Move! Run! Now! The Marines and the remaining civilians sprinted through the narrow opening while behind them, explosions and roars filled the chamber. Japanese soldiers fought and died, buying them precious seconds. Each explosion was a life given so others might live. Each shout was a final prayer for victory. They ran through passages, following Tanaka's map directions. Behind them, the sounds of battle grew fainter. The creatures were feeding now, distracted by the soldiers who had sacrificed themselves. Kenji fell. His old legs gave out from exhaustion. Rodriguez picked him up and carried him without stopping. Chun carried 2 small children. Davis helped an elderly woman who could barely walk. They ran until their lungs burned, until their muscles screamed, until they could not take another step. Then they ran more because stopping meant death for everyone. Finally, impossibly, they saw it. Natural light. Faint gray light filtering through a crack ahead. The exit. Freedom. Life. They stumbled out into the rain and mud of Okinawa. American soldiers surrounded them immediately, weapons raised, shouting in confusion. Here were their Marines, covered in blood and dirt, helping Japanese civilians, carrying children and elderly people from a cave entrance nobody knew existed. Cooper collapsed to his knees in the mud, gasping for air. The rain washed the cave, dust from his face. Above them, artillery fire continued. The battle for Okinawa was still raging. Men were still dying on this island. But here, now, 30 civilians lived because enemies became allies in the darkness. Behind them, deep in the earth, the tunnels rumbled one final time as the creatures sealed the passages, protecting their ancient home from future invaders. The American command tent buzzed with confusion and disbelief. Cooper sat wrapped in a blanket, drinking hot coffee, trying to explain what happened in the tunnels. Around him, officers asked questions and took notes. They did not believe him. He could see it in their eyes. Ancient creatures? Japanese soldiers sacrificing themselves to save civilians? It sounded like a combat stress hallucination. Sergeant Cooper, the colonel said carefully, "You're telling me that Lieutenant Tanaka and 4 Japanese soldiers stayed behind to let you escape? That they fought monsters to protect civilians?" "Yes, sir," Cooper said firmly. "That's exactly what happened. And these creatures, You say they were like prehistoric lizards. I know how it sounds, sir. But Chun, Davis, and Rodriguez all saw them. The civilians saw them. The Japanese soldiers saw them. We have 30 witnesses. The colonel exchanged looks with the intelligence officer. They were thinking the same thing. Battle fatigue, shell shock, hallucinations from stress and fear. These were common in war. Men saw things that were not there, believed impossible stories. The Battle of Okinawa had been particularly brutal, and these Marines had been fighting for weeks. We'll send a team to explore the tunnels, the colonel said. For now, you and your men get medical attention and rest. That's an order. But when engineers went to the cave entrance, they found it collapsed. The tunnel system had sealed itself somehow, or perhaps the explosions from the grenades had caused a cave-in. When they tried to dig, they found solid rock. It would take months of work to excavate. The military decided it was not worth the effort. The battle was still raging. They needed men fighting, not digging. The official report said Sergeant Cooper and his unit had encountered enemy resistance in cave systems, engaged in combat, and successfully evacuated 30 Okinawan civilians. No mention of creatures. No mention of cooperation with Japanese forces. Just a standard combat action. The report listed Lieutenant Tanaka and his men as killed in action, but it did not mention their sacrifice. It did not tell how enemies became allies. It did not explain that some men die not for their country, but for simple human decency. Cooper received a Bronze Star for heroism. He accepted it quietly, feeling it should have belonged to Tanaka instead. Chun, Davis, and Rodriguez received commendations. The civilians were moved to a safe camp away from the fighting. The Battle of Okinawa continued for 2 more months. It was the bloodiest battle in the Pacific War. When it finally ended in June 1945, the casualties were staggering. Over 12,000 Americans killed, over 70,000 Japanese soldiers killed, and over 100,000 Okinawan civilians dead, caught between 2 armies that turned their beautiful island into hell on earth. The war ended 3 months later when atomic bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan surrendered. The Pacific War was over. Soldiers went home to try to forget the terrible things they had seen and done. Cooper returned to Michigan. He married his sweetheart, had children, worked in a factory, lived a quiet American life. But he never forgot the tunnels. Never forgot Tanaka's face in those final moments. Never forgot the promise he made. For 20 years, he said nothing. The military had classified the tunnel reports. Speaking about it would mean trouble. But in 1965, when the Vietnam War was dividing America, Cooper decided some truths needed to be told. He wrote letters to Japanese veteran organizations. He searched for information about Lieutenant Tanaka. He learned Tanaka had come from Osaka, had been a schoolteacher before the war, had a wife and daughter who thought he had died like millions of other Japanese soldiers. With Yuki's help, translating letters between America and Japan, Cooper connected with Tanaka's family. He told them what their husband and father had done, how he saved 30 innocent lives, how he showed that honor existed even in war, how he proved that enemies could become brothers when protecting the helpless. In 1968, Cooper traveled to Okinawa for the first time since the war. The island had changed dramatically. American military bases covered much of the land. New buildings replaced bombed ruins. Tourism was beginning. The island was healing, but scars remained. Yuki met him at the airport. She was 43 now, a teacher helping Okinawan children learn about peace. She had never forgotten the young Marine sergeant who saved her and her people in the darkness. "I want to show you something," she said. She drove him to a quiet hillside away from the cities and bases. There stood a small stone memorial. It was not official. The government had not built it. Local people had raised money and carved it themselves because some stories needed to be remembered even when governments wanted them forgotten. The memorial listed names. American names and Japanese names together. Cooper saw his own name. Chun, Davis, Rodriguez, Thompson, and the others who had waited above. And there, carved carefully in both English and Japanese, was Tanaka's name and the names of his men who died in the tunnels. Below the names, an inscription read in 3 languages, English, Japanese, and Okinawan. Here are remembered soldiers of different armies who became one family. They crossed the lines of war to protect the innocent. They proved that humanity lives even in darkness. May their sacrifice teach us that enemies are just people serving different flags, and honor has no nationality. Cooper touched Tanaka's name on the stone. His eyes filled with tears for the first time since the war ended. 23 years of holding it in, and now it came out in that quiet hillside as birds sang and wind rustled through trees that had grown since the battle ended. Did they ever find the tunnels again? Cooper asked quietly. Yuki shook her head. The military tried many times. They used maps, metal detectors, ground radar. They found nothing. The tunnels sealed themselves completely, like they never existed. Maybe the creatures made sure nobody would disturb them again. Do you think they're still down there? Old Kenji believed they are. Before he died last year, he told me the Guardians sleep again now. He said they wake only when humans become too greedy, too destructive, too disrespectful of the sacred places. The war woke them. The peace let them sleep again. Cooper looked at the hills of Okinawa, green and beautiful in the sunlight. Somewhere beneath those hills, tunnels stretched through the darkness. Somewhere down there, ancient creatures slept in chambers carved 1,000 years ago. And somewhere in those tunnels, the spirits of young men who died together still stood guard, forever protecting those who cannot protect themselves. I kept my promise, Cooper said to the memorial stone. I told them about you. I made sure people know you were not monsters. You were soldiers doing your duty. You protected the innocent. You showed us all what honor really means. Yuki placed flowers at the memorial. My children come here every year. I teach them this story. I tell them that their grandmother survived because enemies chose humanity over hate. That is the lesson. Not who won the war, not whose flag flew at the end, but that humans can choose compassion even when everything tells them to choose violence. They stood in silence for a long time, two survivors of a terrible war, remembering the dead and honoring the choice that saved lives. As the sun set over Okinawa, painting the sky in colors of fire and blood, Cooper made a silent prayer. He prayed for all the soldiers who died in that war. Japanese, American, Okinawan. He prayed they found peace wherever warriors' spirits go. And he prayed that future generations would learn from this story that the true enemy is never the soldier standing across from you, but the hate that puts you there in the first place. The next morning, Cooper visited the cave entrance where they had emerged 23 years ago. It was gone, completely vanished. Trees grew where the opening had been. Solid rock faced him where there should have been a passage. The earth had reclaimed its secrets. He smiled, thinking of the creatures sleeping below, thinking of Tanaka standing guard in eternal darkness. Some stories ended not with victory or defeat, but with mysteries that should stay mysteries. Some truths lived better in whispered legends than in official reports. Cooper placed a single flower on the ground where the entrance used to be, a gift to the guardians below, a thank you for letting them escape, a promise to never speak of the exact location, to never let others disturb the ancient rest. Then he walked back to the rental car, where Yuki waited, back to the living world where survivors carried the weight of memory and the hope of peace. Behind him, the hill stood silent and green, keeping its secrets beneath the soil, keeping its guardians in eternal sleep, keeping its promise to protect Okinawa from those who would harm her until the end of time itself.